It feels appropriate to be here in Birr for different reasons, the most obvious being it's where the action was in 697. But we're also in the dead centre of Ireland, and that's appropriate because we're looking outwards. Though a jokey rival for the title of Dead Centre of Ireland, of course, would be Glasnevin Cemetery in Dublin. On another humorous note, and I think James would know more about it than me, and I think it may be in Adamnán's life of Columkill, that he was the first person to mention the Loch Ness Monster. So that's another claim to fame that the gentleman that we're talking about has. Just to mention too that for those accessible to Birr over the next month or two, the library will be closed by the time we finish here today, but there will be an exhibition upstairs in Birr Library. So if anybody wants to visit that who's accessible to Birr. I have a couple of handouts for you. There's 3 sheets which will be coming round. One handout on green paper is a popular history quiz on non-violence in Irish history. The answers are on the back. The second sheet on lilac paper is a resource list for further reading, and you can look at these in your own time. In 10 or 15 minutes, I cannot cover 5,000 years of peace history, so I'm giving you these handouts to follow stuff up by yourself as you wish. And the third sheet, which is a little pink sheet, is a comment or question form, which halfway through my session, my quarter of an hour here, I'll be asking you to have a little buzz group in your table, and you can rearrange yourselves slightly so everybody can hear everybody, and to fill in a question or comment, but I'll say something more about that. Firstly, in terms of beginning, I'd like to make a personal family point. In 1858, there was a great pro-imperialist and militarist speech given in Birr at the unveiling of a gun which is still on display in John's Mall here in the town. It was captured from the Russians in Sevastopol during the Crimean War. And this militaristic speech was made by a guy called Adam Mitchell, who was my great-great-grandfather. And he was a pillar of the Protestant establishment of the time. And I hope my talk here today goes one step towards redressing the family balance to peace. I'm going to go back a few thousand years before Adamnán, 5,000 years ago from the present, in fact. If you know about the Cage of Fields in North Mayo, it's the largest known Stone Age settlement in the world, where people lived a peaceful, settled agricultural existence with no form of defence, or obviously there was no attack. The houses were scattered. They were living totally peacefully. Was this because humans were so sparse at the time that there was no sources of conflict? Was it a matriarchal society and therefore less prone to war making? Was it simply before Neolithic, Bronze Age and Iron Age arms races? What we do know is that this peaceful society existed 5,000 years ago. And if they can do it, why can't we? A wise woman I know, Sue Williams, who in the late 1980s worked for the Conciliation Project Quaker House in Belfast, has said, and she should know given the different places where she worked around the world, different sites of conflict and so on, that no matter how violent the situation, there are always people working peacefully and non-violently to deal with the issues. And it is disempowering to them to say human nature, it's disempowering to them to say violence is needed. I believe that's true today, and human nature being what it is, it was true in the past. Yes, a skeleton may appear from the Bronze Age with marks which indicate a bloody death. But what that doesn't show is the skeletons of the people who worked for peace, who tried to avoid violence and tried to get on with their lives. There's an African proverb that says, "Until lions have their historians, tales of hunters will always glorify the hunter." We should bear this in mind when thinking of the past. I list briefly some historical examples of non-violence without going into detail that I don't have time for. The word boycott is of Irish origin in the land struggle of the latter 19th century and made it into numerous languages other than English. Daniel O'Connell was an important figure not only in building a mass non-violent democratic movement, but also on the European stage. And for me, the most important part of the Irish national struggle of the early 20th century was not the military attacks, but the simple and non-violent action of local councils and newly elected MPs in 1919 in transferring their allegiance to the Dáil, to the first Dáil. And if we go back a century or so before Adamnán's time, it seems St. Bridget may have got up to all sorts of things, including being a mediator and provider of a place of sanctuary. And there are so many stories about Bridget, and even if she didn't get up to all of these things, I think it's very relevant that these things were ascribed to her. And in modern times, Irish military peacekeeping missions with the UN have been a source of national pride. I could go on and on. The WILF, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom Congress of 1926 was held in Dublin. The Irish representative to WILF was Louis Bennett, who was an all-round activist, not just on peace, including as a mediator in the Civil War following independence, but on women's and labour rights. And it's notable that Gene Sharp, in his classic 1973 book, The Politics of Nonviolent Action, with its famous 198 sort of nonviolent tactics, gives quite a number of Irish examples. There are many stories that have not been told. There are many stories from Northern Ireland, where I live in Belfast, and I've lived there for a long time. And sometimes people have suffered for the cause of peace. One person who did suffer significantly was a woman called Sadie Patterson, who was a peace and trade union activist, and she was severely injured, in fact, in a Peace People rally in 1976 when it was attacked. I'm not talking about looking at anything in rose-tinted spectacles. We cannot deny the importance of violence in Irish history. What we can do is avoid being blinded by a kings and battles model of history. And peace came to Northern Ireland through a process of talking, mediation and conciliation, as well as grassroots action. And the perpetrators, including the British state, eventually pulled in their horns and generally forsook violence. But this learning has not been extrapolated from in relation to other situations, or even internally in the North in relation to militarism in general, or in the Republic, where at an official level, putting its faith in NATO and the developing EU militarism. We should remember the huge Irish experience of peace and non-violence.